back to Hashtag Single with Jeanette Bonner. I am not a relationship expert or sex therapist. I'm just a regular New York City woman navigating the world as a single, independent feminist. Hashtag Single is about having honest conversations with other singles in today's device-obsessed culture. So I hope you'll join me on this interesting, challenging, and complex journey as we navigate the ins and outs of singledom. What's up, guys? Happy May. Welcome back to Hashtag Single. I'm Jeanette Bonner. Obviously, you are listening to the feminist podcast about dating in modern times. Welcome back. We are so excited to have you here with us today. I have an incredible guest with me. Leisse Wilcox is a transformational mindset and success coach working with single women today on dating and the relationship we have with ourselves while dating. Very key. And on top of that, she is a best-selling author and taco enthusiast. Leisse, so happy to have you. Welcome to Hashtag Single.
Thank you. And thank you for including each of those very important elements.
I know, right? Like that's what your like what your elegy is going to be, left in life.
Honestly,
like,
that's
author,
so accurate.
Relationship coach, tacos. Well, do you like that? I had to throw that in. No, it's in your Insta bio. So, I figure it was fair game. What's your go-to spot for tacos right now?
Oh, right now, literally nowhere, because I live in a small town just east of Toronto, Canada. And we have one incredible taco truck, but they're only seasonal. And because we're going into third lockdown, I can't go anywhere. So I'm like in a serious taco deficit right now.
I'm so embarrassed to say I actually didn't know that.
Yeah.
So sort of you went into it, came out of it, went into it, came out of it, went into it, came out of it again?
For 13 months. It's a shit show. And, like most of my clients are in the US. A lot of my friends are in the US. So watching Instagram feeds like, I'm getting my vaccine. I'm like, fuck. Like,
it's so weird because you'd think culturally that Canada would totally like ace us.
And we're just like, it's the weirdest experience right now. It's like, I've used this analogy so much, people are probably getting annoyed of it, but it's like, I feel like I'm a teenager pointing to my friends in the States being like, yeah, but look what they're allowed to do. Okay.
Sarah's mom lets her do this.
Biden's kids are allowed to do this. How come we're not? It's so...
Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry to hear that. And they said it for 13 months definitively?
No, we're on month 13. So we've been in three separate lockdowns, but like just as like last year, for example, at the time that we're recording this, last year we went into a lockdown for 2 weeks. That's basically lasted more than a year. It's like, oh my God, guys, it's time to get your stories straight here and figure out which way is up.
Oh, I can't. I mean, psychologically, that's so hard. I just can't even process what you're going through. So, oh gosh, my empathy.
Thank you.
Let's talk about more fun things like dating, which is always fun, right? Before we dive in, I just want to take a second to read your bio so we can let listeners know a little bit more about you and your background. Leisse Wilcox is a transformational mindset and success coach who has been featured on ABC, HGTV, Good Day PA, Sirius XM Radio, and in Forbes, The Toronto Star, So She Slays, and many other publications. Leisse is also a TEDx speaker, podcast host, certified NLP practitioner, and author of To Call Myself Beloved, A Story of Hope, Healing, and Coming Home. She's been featured on season 2 of Amazon Prime's docuseries The Social Movement, which is the mission of impacting humanity at a large scale. Leisse is also a cancer survivor, mom of 3, an aforementioned taco enthusiast, and currently resides, as we mentioned, in Canada. So, well, you're a badass. I don't actually know where to begin. So let's start with you. What started you on this journey to be a relational coach?
For years, like actual years, I have been talking about being a relationship coach, a relational coach. And when I went through, and that started while I was still married. And when I got divorced, I had so much like self-doubt and imposter syndrome being like, oh my God, how could I ever be a relationship coach? And, 6 years has gone by and I've gone through this incredible process of coming home to myself and really learning how to confront and heal from my own significant traumas, including emotional and narcissistic abuse as a kid, this highly traumatic divorce that led to CPTSD, like complex PTSD, because all divorce did for me was trigger the emotional abuse response from when I was a kid. Like, it was just such a nightmare. And as I was in the thick of that, I got breast cancer. So it was suddenly, and I'm a single parent, I'm self-employed, I have 3 little girls, and it was just like, what the actual fuck is happening? And so I was like, while I was going through my cancer treatments and writing my book, because I wrote my book during chemo, I had this real awareness of like, I can make literally anything beautiful. And I had looked back on my life and everything, every hardship, every challenge, I found a way of really making it purposeful and beautifully my own. And I kind of coined that emotional alchemy. And that became this foundational part of my coaching, that people would kind of happen to find me at the right place in their life where they really needed someone to give them that permission to be who they are. And that's what I had struggled with for so long, through so many decades of abuse, that I wasn't allowed to be who I was. And as I started to really come into my own and really heal, develop a deep and genuine unconditional self-love and acceptance, that's when I found the confidence through my own education, my own experience, to really appreciate that what I do is I coach people through their relational stuff. So I love to find the truth and beauty in relationships you have to yourself and to others, knowing unequivocally that the relationship you have to yourself is the foundation upon which every other relationship is built. Like, that to me seems like it should be the focal point. So people will come to me for business coaching, and the business isn't really the problem. It's the relationship to themselves that needs the healing. We heal that, and then magically all the business stuff falls into place. People come to me for marriage counseling. It's not the marriage that actually needs the attention. It's the individuals that need the attention and healing. We heal that, and then magically the marriage stuff kind of disappears. So that's kind of the condensed version of how I got to be here, is that it's like 100% purpose, passion, authenticity, and integrity driven.
Well, and I love that it started with yourself. Like, you're a true testament of the work, and how wonderful for people to have the opportunity to work with a coach that has been in the muck and the mires and the gutter of it themselves and come through better on the other side. Like, it's wonderful to say, like, I'm a prime example. I've actually been in your place. I've been in your shoes, and I know this process works because I experienced it myself.
Definitely. And I find, like, I've built my business using Instagram as my primary platform, and I have found there's so much falsehood, there's so much rhetoric, there's so much misinformation that, like, oh, if you just think about it and want it bad enough, it'll happen for you. And as somebody who is still single and who deeply desires partnership, I think I also offer a really unique perspective on, like, what makes a healthy relationship. And when you don't necessarily get what you want, like marriage or a great relationship, whatever it is, how do you make peace with that in the meantime while navigating those very complex emotions on yearning and being at peace? And so where I used to have all this shame of, like, oh my God, I'm divorced, I'm single, how could I ever be a relationship coach? I'm like, I have literally every skill set required to make me such an effective relationship coach, because I understand intimately what it feels like on every side of the coin.
Yeah. What was it that made you specifically want to focus on helping women on their journey?
I don't know. I think that because I have male clients as well. My marketing is all focused on a more female demographic, but I definitely work with men. I think it just kind of happened that way. Like, it just kind of evolved that I had this very strong female presence. I'm very conscious, raising 3 girls, I'm very conscious of supporting female-owned businesses and in that vein. But I think it just kind of happened and evolved to be that place.
Kind of organically.
Yeah.
But I knew they always say that like women are the first to ask for help, so first ask for directions and first ask for help. So I think women are very intuitive and very process oriented and very internal in terms of like when things are going wrong. I think a lot of us are okay to like look inwards while also say like, well, if this isn't working, I need someone to help me through it. So it may also just be not accidental, because I do think it's kind of part of our biological system to ask for community and ask for support. Whereas in a generalization, but one I've witnessed on my own experience, men aren't as likely to do that. But there's something to that also. You know what I mean? Like people who ask for help end up being stronger on the other side.
Well, and it's so interesting because most of my clients are the women who are kind of at the top of their game, and no matter what that game is, right? Like a lot of them are public facing or have a public profile, are executives. So they're at like the top of their food chain, or they're the core of their family. So no matter what the work is that they're doing, the role remains the same. They are the support system and everybody leans on them.
Yeah.
So I find like where there's so much value in this work that I do with people one-on-one is that they usually don't have anybody to talk to, not because they don't have friends or a supportive family, but because it like violates the unwritten contract they have that they are the ones who do the supporting. And so then they get this like bottleneck emotional effect, right? That they're being squeezed and squeezed and squeezed. And they're like, oh my God, I have nobody to talk to. Or they go through this list of like, I'm at the top, I'm making multiple six figures. Like I have this family, I have the things that I need. And oh my God, life doesn't feel the way it's quote unquote supposed to. So no matter what this woman does, or no matter who this situation looks or feels like, that remains the same. That it's like, I am such a strong support for so many people, and I feel like I don't have enough support to help me. And that becomes really challenging to ask for help sometimes because it's so uncomfortable.
Yeah. Well, that kind of feeds into something I wanted to talk about with you. We talk a lot about shaming on the podcast, specifically the shaming we receive from society, or even those from a recent episode from those in our personal circles who love us for being single and, for lack of better terminology, straying from the quote unquote norm of being partnered. I know a lot of your work centers around this ideology of shame, but I'm really interested in your coaching around the relationship with ourselves. Like, are you finding there's more shame coming from outside influences, or are women being mean to themselves?
Yeah, I think that my own personal experience, I think I have a superstar family. Like my family supports me, period. And they're so supportive that like my own singleness, it's just this season. They're so
Aw,
I know there's no pressure. There's no nothing. They're very encouraging of like, just be here, like we know there's this incredible person for you if you want that in your life. And in the meantime, just trust it. Like they're really, really wonderful and supportive. I find in, other circles of my life, I think it's the pressure that we put on ourselves. And when we look at that through a lens of shame, it's that feeling of like, I should be doing something differently, or I am so strong and independent and driven and confident and beautiful and successful. What the fuck is wrong with me that I can't just find a partner? And all of our usual kind of masculine energy driven tools to get success, like if I want to get paid more, I put more into my marketing and more into my presence, and then like, bam, more money appears, right? It's like do, achieve, repeat. When we're dating, or when we're in the like quote unquote pursuit of a relationship, there's no algorithm. It doesn't work like that. Despite what a lot of people want to tell you and sell you, like it doesn't work like that. So if we feel like we're out of control, that we don't have the tools to put into place to get what we want, we can't take the usual actions to get what we want, then suddenly we're left with this inner environment and these feelings that are from within, and any meaning that we give something only has meaning because we've assigned it to be that way, right? So if I judge my own singleness as unworthy or less than or incompetent or whatever it is, those really uncomfortable words that we use, I also then have the tools and the skill set and the power to be like, Where does this feeling come from? What story am I really telling myself here? Where is this shame coming from? And how do I allow myself to shift from patience back into presence and really learn to be at peace with where I am, who I am, what I've done, and what I have? And still being able to reconcile, like, it's okay for me to desire something that I don't have, while also being very present and content with what I do.
So I'm like, yes, I agree with that. But like, what kind of, do you have any exercises, or I'm wondering, how, if we acknowledge that this system or experience exists, how can we then find ways to be kinder to ourselves as successful women? It's this dichotomy of like, well, I want to do something to fix the problem. Like, what is it is it just about like meditation and finding peace emotionally, or is there something that we can actively do to balance those two forces in our lives?
Yeah, I mean, it's like the most frustrating answer, because it is this simple and it is this complicated.
Yeah.
you decide to, and some of that, what comes from that, like, no, I decide to be at peace with this, or I decide to be kind to myself. Absolutely. Some of that is mindfulness and meditation. Some of it is action, and action in terms of like, not what can I do more of to work myself towards a goal. Like, even in school, you study hard, you're rewarded with a good grade. You get a good grade, you're rewarded with like a cash bonus from your parents or whatever. Like, we have such an external reward system.
Yeah.
Choosing to be at peace with who you are, where you are, as you are. We're talking about a radical shift into an internal reward system. And an internal reward system is based on things like, let me do a quick scan of my environment. Am I safe where I am? A lot of the times, like, having these intense emotions, we have a physiological response triggered to our fear. We're afraid of being alone. We're afraid of being single. We have to almost like remove ourselves from that emotional experience and be like, wait a second, in this moment, all of my needs actually are being met. So if there's still some discomfort, what can I do that adds more joy, more pleasure into my life that then facilitates me being present? So again, while we live in this very over Instagrammed culture, this over memed culture of like what self-care is and isn't, it's like true self-care is exactly what we quote unquote do when we focus more on what makes me feel good right now. What can I do to support myself right now? How can I be an incredible emotional or physical support to me right here, right now? We're talking radical self-care. And when we shift into that state of I'm going to care for me, then you get the satisfaction of doing. Because now maybe we're like, I don't know, personal experience, spending like $150 on candles and incense to make my home environment just so delicious that like, I put all my lights on dimmer switches because now I have this like incredibly ambient space. And it's like, oh my God, I just feel really good in this moment. And when I feel really good, when I allow myself to tap back into joy and pleasure, there isn't a lot of room to feel that anxiety or lack. So I've like, you can see how it's kind of, it's both and, right? Like I'm doing mindfulness.
Oh yeah. I think that's also really relevant and resonant to the pandemic. I think people, we used to be so stimulated by our outside environment, and then suddenly that was removed and people were, well, how do I maintain my presence, as you say, and my peace and my happiness in different ways? And there was a lot of check-in, and it became really simple, as you said. Sometimes it was just like, I'm going to go for a walk today. I want to be outside, or I'm going to make myself a cup of tea, or I'm going to take a nap in the middle of the day.
Totally. And I feel like I find this particularly for women. It's like, oh, what you should do to take care of yourself, they have to be these like it's just tea or it's just a bath. And it's like, sometimes you have so much tea and you have so many baths, it's like enough. That doesn't feel like care anymore. It's like, we have such a linear threshold of what self-care for your feminine self looks like. And it's wrong, right? It's so wrong. Like, so I don't know. I'm sitting here in my house looking at my hammock. I'm like, I want to go swing in my hammock, or I want to like get some sparklers and light sparklers after dark because that feels great. Or there's a host of things we can do that make us feel good, and that's so individual. It's not self-care TM that you can choose from this menu of 5 things we've prepared for you. No, you can do whatever you want in the way that feels really good for you, even within the limits that we've been experiencing.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I agree with you. I think it's tricky, but if any good comes out of this year, I think maybe I'm hoping that it's just this, we're more attuned to our internal selves and how we can, and what we need to get through the day. It's beautiful. I want to shift gears for a moment and talk about something that's been on my mind recently. One of my best friends, Scott, recently had a baby. She's 1 month old now. And over the weekend, I went to go see her for the first time. And we went to brunch. It was this gorgeous spring day. We got to eat outside, pandemic safe. Sorry if that makes you
No, I'm just like having this beautiful daydream of like there are birds chirping and we're sitting on a patio. It's so nice.
But she was telling me about her experience giving birth, that she'd had some problems. Excuse me. And she told me this really interesting thing. She said in the hospital, even though, she's 38, she was not considered, what do they call it? A geriatric pregnancy, right? Because it's New York. She told me that, that they said the average age for women giving birth in New York was like 40, 41, and that 45, 46 was considered geriatric. So they didn't panic when she had complications. So it's funny because anywhere else in the country, giving birth at 38 would be considered geriatric, but not in New York. So anyway, that got me thinking about pregnancy and motherhood. And I wanted to get your thoughts on this, not only because it's May and Mother's Day this month, but because you yourself have children and are single, as you mentioned. So if you're open to it, I'd love to hear about your experience as a single woman dating with children. What are some of the advantages and disadvantages that you've experienced?
Where should we start?
What are some of the good things that you've experienced dating with?
The good thing is that and again, this comes from I'm my own best client, right? And authenticity and integrity are such core values of mine that they are the driving forces behind my business rather. So like I can say this with a great degree of certainty. I live this, like I walk my own talk. For me, the best thing about dating with children is that like ain't nobody got time for bullshit. Period. Yes. There's no waffling, and there's no waffling, and I'm not like overcommitting to a relationship in my head and sabotaging it. And I know there's somebody sitting there being like, she's doing this. I'm not doing that. I'm not walking through a relationship 10 seconds in and like foreseeing the future and then ending it in the future so I don't have to commit to it. That's not happening. I am so clear on what my needs are as a person, and I am so clear on what our needs are as a family, that it's a ridiculously accurate filter as to who can come into our lives, period. Right? That's a blessing and a curse because, and the pandemic definitely has made this more challenging as well, that, some of us want a long-term relationship, and some of us, while waiting for a long-term relationship, are very cool to have a short-term relationship. And that can be a little bit tricky, of course, in the pandemic, but of course, balancing a family as well, because there's not a lot of room for spontaneity. So, if I have my kids half time, that means that for 1 week, I'm 100% on. And even when they're not physically in my care, my brain is still, simmering away of like, I do need to make sure I'm available in case anything goes wrong, right? So it's like you don't fully turn it off. But yeah, there's no like, hey, what are you doing tonight? You want to grab this? It's like, I can't, but how about next Wednesday?
You got to plan it. Yeah.
And so that's a challenge I find. While there's still a lot of freedom, and especially, as I say, with respect to knowing so specifically what you want and need, it's like an incredible filter or lens that you can put onto a relationship. And even like visualizing that relationship. Like it's so easy to tap into exactly who this person is and what the dynamic feels like for our family and for my own intimate relationship. That is such an advantage, I think, to having kids, because you just know so accurately what you want.
I love that you use the term freedom in that too, because I think there's a mindset for single women that the more selective they are, the less likely they are to find someone, or God forbid, this word has come up in previous podcasts, they're picky. But I love that you think that that's an advantage. That's a benefit. There's freedom to knowing exactly what you want. That's beautiful.
I really do. And I feel like I've struggled with this myself. We lose sight of the scale, right? We get so focused on what we can see, touch, look at, whatever. We forget that there are like 7 billion people in the world. The scale of how many people are available is shocking. Like, I don't think you can fully wrap your head around it. And so, we meet 3 people and it's like, and I've totally done this. It's like, well, guess that's it for me. Like, there's I'm single forever. And it's like, okay, you've dated 3 people. So maybe we could just dial that back and extrapolate that there are so many more people. So I don't know. I'm totally jumping ahead, but this just kind of came up, if I can share it.
Yeah. Share whatever. Yeah.
One of the antidotes I find to that of like, I met this person and I thought it was going to be like, on paper, he looked like he was going to be exactly what I needed. Or even, we went on a couple of dates and he felt like exactly what I needed and what I wanted, and it didn't work out. And that is painful. Like, there's no way to slice it. It's painful. It breaks your heart when, things don't add up to what you think you really want in that moment. And one of the little tools that I use is to treat every single person you meet as an expander. So if I, for example, connect with somebody who I'm really intent on being with somebody who doesn't have their own kids, because that works for me. Yeah. Yeah, that's a great way of saying it. When I meet somebody who is, who gives off the vibe that I want to be with and who has all those qualities and values that are really important to me and doesn't have kids, and then it doesn't work out, and those feelings of frustration or loneliness or like doubt start to creep in, I consciously make myself look at the situation and be like, what did you learn from this? How did this man expand your horizon and your vision of what is possible? Because if this guy exists, what a beautiful marker and totem that somebody else, and very likely thousands of other people, exist just like him. And so I find that that's like one of those actionable tools that invites you to be present in the moment, simply by looking at like, what a gift to get this on my radar, that I now have conscious proof, like conscious proof that what I want is totally real. The timing or the vibe or the whatever wasn't necessarily meant to be with this person, but what an incredible takeaway that I got this little breadcrumb that like, oh yeah, he's super real. He absolutely exists. Here's an indicator, or like an amuse-bouche of what's to come for you.
I like that so much, and because it completely eradicates this ridiculous notion of the one.
I know.
That like TV seems to be obsessed with, like finding the one for you.
We could dispel that so quickly. It's just like, it's so false.
Yeah, obviously. I mean, people have multiple relationships in their lifetime. That alone tells you. But the idea that it sort of reminded me of something. I don't know if you know this, but I'm also an actor as well. And a lot of these similar feelings of frustration and lack of being able to take action and rejection, they're bed sisters with acting, which is a fun aspect for my life, to just be it from both angles. Yeah, basically. So, but one of the things, that I've been working through also in my emotional work as an actor, to try to stay positive through this journey, has been a very similar concept, which is like, instead of, if you see your friend, like I was watching Blacklist last night and I literally saw a girl I knew and I was like, oh my God. And a first feeling was, jealousy and like, how did she get it and I'm not getting it? That's our first thing. But instead to recognize it of like, no, if she can get it, you can get it. Like you're no, like that's just showing you what's possible. So I think that's very in line with what you were talking about.
Sometimes 100% it is. And sometimes I'm very visual. And part of my own self-care or my own self-soothing that I totally teach to clients as well is to really make things as visual as absolutely possible. So for me, sometimes I think of it as like, this divine cooking staff. Like they're in this kitchen far beyond where I can see or access, but then they like whip up this little dish and they hand this person down to me, or they hand this opportunity down to me. And they're like, we just wanted to let you know, like, this is what you were thinking of. And I'm like, I take a little taste and I'm like, oh, that's exactly what I was thinking. And they're like, okay, cool. And they go back to their like kitchen in the sky. And they're like, all right, she likes this. She didn't, maybe he could have been a little bit funnier, or,
add some lemon.
Yeah, totally. Maybe add up the wealth on this one too. But like whatever it is, I feel like it's this constant co-creation of like, is this what you were thinking? And I say, yeah, that's totally what I was thinking. Thank you. And they go back to their own lab and they work on the next model.
That's so cute. I want that.
And I think that's totally true for acting too, right? I was like, I'm obsessed with The American Office. Like in every part of it, the show, the podcast, the books, all of it. And when you listen to the actors tell their story, they could easily have been talking about relationships. They were just about to give up, almost all of them across the board. They were just about to give up, and then they had this one glimmer of an opportunity and everything fell into place. And it's like, it's crazy. It's fascinating. That's life. Like that's life. It's really hard and it's really beautiful all at the same time.
Yeah. Well said. Going back to your experience, I'm curious if you found any social or societal stigmas for being single with children. Or here's the more interesting question. Are people less shaming about your single status because you've already had children?
That's a great question. And I don't really even know how to answer it. I feel like I have defied almost all expectations. And I maybe there is single shaming, or maybe there's judgment, but maybe my own arrogance supersedes that, because I feel like, there's a trope, right? There's a trope to being a single mom of 3. And I know what that trope is. And I was like, nope, swipe that away. Like I'm not becoming that. And even if that's what people expect me to be, I'm going to put my blinders on so tight that I can't even see or hear what they might be thinking, saying, projecting onto me. And I think some of that is my own internal drive to be me and do what feels really good for me and create my own expectations of what my own life looks and feels like. Worth mentioning, I am also a Taurus, and I feel like I have like I am that stubborn. So, in my own career, for example, like being a single parent of 3 little girls who for most of their lives, like until very recently, had 80 to 100% custody with like no support, failure is not a fucking option for me. Right?
Right.
And I'm so driven by that I think that I then consciously put up blinders to tune out what other people might be thinking or saying. Does that make sense?
That's lovely that you have that quality. It's crazy. I mean, I literally got into this conversation. It was the same brunch where we were just talking so much about motherhood and, I said, I just asked her because I'm curious because it's on my mind, like I said, with the podcast and stuff. And I said, when you were married and you didn't have kids, how annoying were people about like, are you going to have a baby? And she was like, oh my God, it was nonstop. And I said, so are people less meddlesome? Or do people feel soothed now that you did the thing that you've been expected to do as a woman in society? Have they stopped asking you questions, And, she's been a mother all of 1 month, so she couldn't.
So she
really
obviously has all the answers.
I know. It was a little more rhetorical. But I'm really fascinated by this concept of like, and actually the answer was interesting. My friend Scott said he heard a lot less fussing. He said once he told people that he was having a baby, and I was like, oh, wow. So it happens on both sides. Once you fulfill that even subconscious expectation that society has, that anxious, like, but who are you if you're not this person? Once you do it, people sort of go, okay, I got it. You're
because
in,
now they can make sense of you.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think it's like an intentional, like, I like you, I don't like you if you don't do this. But I think there's an anxiety with not being able to figure women out. Or as I told my friend Scott, like, for me, people are weird to me because they're like, but you're pretty and you're intelligent and you seem well-spoken and you're conversational and you seem successful. So why are you single? It's like, I don't get it. What are you doing wrong? Because it doesn't make sense to me that you should be single.
I'm sorry that you've had that experience. It's like, that's like the worst feeling. You're like, thank you. I've been wondering the same thing myself. But thank you.
Compliment.
I know. And, but where I come from professionally, immediately, like I go into like, I want to even protect you mode, right? That it's like, wait. This isn't even the conversation that we should be having. Like the conversation we should be having about this topic is, what the fuck does your life and the impact of your life have on somebody else's life?
True story, yeah.
And now to me, as a relational coach, I'm like, let's talk about boundaries.
Yes, please.
From both directions. Because some people treat us how we allow them to treat us, right?
That's true.
And it's uncomfortable because that means if I want somebody to treat me differently, I got to set a different boundary, and that boundary comes from me. So if I'm getting into that conversation where I feel judged and shamed and like people are heaping their own stuff onto me, the responsibility and the onus of my own self-protection is on me to start looking at what my boundaries are and where they need some strengthening and how to set very clear, loving, healthy boundaries that allow me to be in this relationship with family member, friend, colleague, whomever it is, while still being very mindful of protecting my own mental and emotional health. And I mean, that's from my business, right? Like, that's where I get really interested and turned on is like, if you find that you are constantly in these conversations, it's not about society. It's not about what others expect from you. It's what do you expect of you and how are you responding in those moments and what can we tweak? What can we go deeper with and heal? What stories can we look at that are coming out and like repeating themselves in these conscious patterns over and over again? What is the work that needs to be done that we can heal it to allow those conversations to literally disintegrate and melt away?
Yeah, just to sort of roll off you and not be.
And I, as again, somebody who is single, who has 3 kids, I turned 40 like around Mother's Day weekend. I don't experience that, period. And yes, I have a very supportive extended family. I've also been incredibly selective about who is allowed in my world. Right. And that does start with me. That's like part of that is a natural drive. Yes. And a lot of it is very conscious relationship choices that I have made to protect and serve myself.
I mean, I need that work. Let's be like, I think we all need that work.
A lot of us do.
I'm sure there's things that I can do to reinforce myself in that situation or build myself up. I will say, like, makes me think of this one situation. I was in my pre-pandemic life, I was a tour guide, and so you're meeting tons of people all the time, and you spend hours with them, and you talk about your lives, and they're very curious about your life in New York specifically, and relationships are always on the platter. Again, like people are curious or people are trying to solve the quote unquote problem or the equation or just figure you out in general. And I do remember this one specific moment where, again, older gentleman, and he said all the things, but you seem very attractive and well-spoken and interesting, he said, I don't remember the way he phrased it. I can't imagine he said, like, what's wrong with you? But what I do remember is the way I responded. I actually said to him, how interesting that you didn't ask me why I'm not finding the person I'm looking for. And then, he sort of laughed in the moment, but he came back to me an hour later. I was with him the whole day, but he just pulled me aside and he's like, I just wanted to apologize because you're correct. And he's like, absolutely. I'm glad you pointed that out to me. And that was just like a moment where I took away and I was like, it's not a problem at all. I was like, it's just curious to me that your first assumption is that I haven't been picked, whereas the reality is that I haven't found the one that I want to pick.
Yes, totally. And like slow clap for you in that moment, being like, here's a little reframe, right? Immediately what I want to say too is that people are all of us, like self included, we're so self-absorbed. We are so focused on our own life. That's how we are built. We are biologically wired, yes, to be part of a group and to make sure that we come out on top, period. Like that's how we survive, right? And how that manifests socially, particularly now that we haven't really had the like normal social life that we've been used to for months on end. We have, in large part, we have no idea how to relate to other people. And so we kind of say what's on our mind, on our heart, through our perspective, through our lens, without even being able to fully see how that's going to land for somebody else, right?
Yeah, yeah.
You know, to share an anecdote, I live in this small town. I talk about being single so often that I thought it was really, really obvious to everybody who knows me that I'm so open to being set up. Like I really desire that. I really deeply desire to meet somebody organically through somebody I know. I thought that was so obvious. And recently in this tiny little town that I live in, it's like two men have come across my radar. One is like a software engineer. He's like awesome guy, really, really funny, driven. The other is an actual former professional athlete who moved back here to be closer to family. Like it checks all the boxes.
Hell yeah.
And then you start doing this Instagram or Facebook deep dive and I'm like, oh my God, we have not one friend in common. We have several friends in common, like several.
Shame on them.
And none of them even
keeping him a secret.
Like, what the fuck is that? And I said to a friend of mine, because I was pretty upset. And I said to a friend of mine, like in this moment of anger, I was like, do you not give a shit about my happiness? And he was like, no. He was like, no, Leisse, we all have our own stuff. And I was like, oh my God.
Why are you not thinking of me all the time?
How did I not see that? And so, you know, there's that boundary, there's that intentionality of like, okay, so maybe knowing that everybody is just focused on themselves, how do we adjust our boundaries accordingly to really, again, advocate for ourselves, but be very clear and specific as to what we expect from those around us? Because when we can really communicate lovingly, affectionately, and very succinctly what we expect of the behavior from other people around us, now we're getting into very conscious communication and very, very conscious relationships, right? By laying it out on the table of what we actually want. And yes, I do want to be introduced to that hockey player, just so everybody knows who's listening. Like, why would I not want to be introduced to him?
Hi.
You assholes.
Going back to what we were kind of talking about at the top of the episode in terms of like the blame that women place on themselves for not like achieving something they wanted. It won't be a surprise to you to learn or to know that there's an emerging demographic of, you know, we've been talking about being single with children, but single childless women. There's a book called OTHERHOOD by Melanie Notkin, and she sort of attributes it to being granddaughters of the feminist movement. You know, we're expected to have college education and job access that our mothers didn't. However, many of these women remain single and childless longer than expected. So the women who are single and childless but wanting children, interestingly enough, are more likely to be college-educated women. I mean, that makes sense because you're kind of spending time on your career. So, I mean, the thing that I find most interesting among this demographic, myself included, is, again, the blame that women place on themselves for not achieving this thing that they want. They internalize this difference as being sort of our fault.
Yeah.
So if you were working with a client like this, and you can pretend it's me if you want, but, you know, how would you address this specifically? How would you help a single childless woman who wants children in the future to work through this?
I mean, we'd start with a breakthrough day, which is like an 8-hour coaching session back to back to back to back. So like, keep that context. I wish I had a magic wand to be like, oh, we would do this.
What's the 8-second version of that?
That we are having an incredibly postmodern conversation in this moment, right? Because at no other time in human history, forget about our generation's experience, in fucking human history.
Yeah.
This has never happened before for our species.
It's crazy.
We are driven to procreate and have children by a specific age, which is like all very biologically aligned for us, right? Well, when we opened up the gates of like, and now I'm going to pursue education and I'm going to pursue a career, which means I have shifted my human experience and the purpose thereof to be not singularly focused on propagating our species. We just blew up our own societal expectations as we know them. And that sounds very dramatic because it is. Because now all of a sudden we've created this myth that we should be able to do this, do that, and have this, and have that, and just balance it effortlessly. It's not effortless. Having a career is hard. Having a family is hard. Having both of those things at the same time, whew, like it's really hard. And so some of that pressure, I think the 8-second version, which is now like 3 minutes in, is that we start with really getting a very clear perspective on the context of what's actually happening, because that mental chatter starts to amp up and that dialogue starts to amp up. And when we back it up by Hollywood and, you know, things we see around us in pop culture, that's so distorted. It's so distorted. It's not reality, that we have to start by getting a really clear perspective and context on what is the reality. And if you've invested X number of years and dollars in your education and then your career and then this and then that, it's like, of course you haven't, you know, had enough time or energy or even subconscious mental space to receive that partnership, to be in a place that can position you to have kids while also still navigating what you want out of your life professionally. It's very, very, very difficult. And yet the default through, I don't know, thousands of years of systemic oppression is like to just take on that responsibility ourselves, be like, oh, this is my fault. No, it's not.
I can fix it. Yeah, it's my fault and I can fix it.
Does that make sense? Or is that comforting in any way? It's like,
it is.
It's an unfair expectation.
I think you're right. I think it's just like taking a moment to be like absorb the enormity of it when you reframe it that way and be like, yo, this is, first of all, it's not my fault. I hate that word. But I do think a lot of people feel like that is somehow subconsciously or subliminally their fault for not getting this thing. You know, I've been given all of the freedoms that generations before me have not been given. So if I want something, theoretically, I should be able to get it. And if I haven't gotten it yet, I must be doing something wrong. So taking a step back to just acknowledge that like that line of thinking is totally bananas and like give yourself some grace to process that.
I'm Canadian. I love going to the US. Like I can't wait to travel to the US again. Like I can't underline this enough. But I have a friend who has dual citizenship. And so we laugh, you know, in the before time when she was kind of going back and forth between Toronto and Florida, like we laugh at when you go to the grocery store here, you there's probably like 10 different kinds of yogurt on the shelf, right? But when we go to like America, there are like 35,000 kinds of yogurt to choose from. And it's like, how, like I could have any of this yogurt. How the hell am I going to choose the right yogurt? What if I miss out on the better yogurt? Is this the better yogurt?
Oh my God.
Life choices have become like the yogurt aisle in the USA in the post-feminist movement, especially in fourth wave feminism, because suddenly it's like, you can literally have anything you want. Don't fuck it up. It's like, oh, geez. Oh, my God. Okay. How do I know? There's so much choice that comes with a phenomenal amount of pressure to do the right thing, even though we're still experiencing time and experience in this like very linear way.
That's gorgeous. I mean, it's a beautiful problem, right? I think that yogurt analogy just sort of.
But I'm right.
Because dating is the yogurt aisle, right?
Online
it's literally
dating.
Like
online dating
thing.
is the yogurt aisle.
I have in New York City potentially 4 million people. That's an exaggeration, but I have millions of people to choose from.
And that's not hyperbole. That's fact.
I know. And it's so intense.
I know.
And what if I pick the wrong yogurt?
Exactly. And then I think, you know, from a dating perspective, I have so much faith in spirituality that I think you have to bring it back to that. It's like, oh, honey, what if it's not entirely up to you? Like, what if you could allow yourself to do what feels really good be present in your life, making conscious decisions based on your own purpose and what makes you feel aligned, what lines up with your values, and trust that there is something so much bigger than you that really does want what's best for you. And what if you know that this greater force, you can call it God, universe, whatever you want to call it, just whatever, if they're like acting in your best interest to really set you up for success and do what is best for you, isn't it kind of possible and very likely that they're doing that for somebody else, and that eventually those two people are going to cross their paths and it won't actually feel that arduous? It won't actually feel like you have to be in control or in charge, that maybe it actually could just happen, and that the learning curve comes from trusting that.
What a gorgeous way to end this episode. I'm meditating on that vibe and that energy, and just trying to put my trust in the universe. I love that.
And again, you know, that's its own thing. Like, trust is a very, very big deal. When you're like, if you imagine you're going down this stream, or this like rapid stream, you're clinging onto a rock for dear life because you do not want to let go and be taken down this stream. When you allow yourself to let go, it's an active process. Like, is this surrender, this trust? It is an action. You're allowing yourself to let go and trust that you're just going to be okay. And that's where we get, again, this blend of action and inaction working together in harmony.
Yes. Nothing better than that. I feel like I just got the biggest hug from you.
Oh, good. That's my intention.
Big, beautiful virtual pandemic podcast hug.
Good.
You're like, it's going to be okay.
It really is. It really is.
Oh my God. Leisse, it's been phenomenal talking to you. Thank you so much for reaching out and connecting with me. This has been a real privilege for me.
Oh, my pleasure. I feel the same way. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. If people want to work with you, how can they find you?
On my shiny brand new website, leissewilcox.com. So LEISSEWILCOX.com. I'm also very active on Instagram every day at Leisse Wilcox. Those are the best ways.
Perfection. Yeah. Well, we hope you guys got something out of this episode, and we hope you choose to connect with Leisse in a stronger way. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider passing it on to a friend. Give us a like and a subscribe on Apple Podcasts so you can help our content rise to the top. And be sure to follow us over at #SinglePod on Instagram so we can stay in touch. That's it for this episode, you guys. We will catch you next time.